Good evening, everybody out there in YouTube land. This is Tom Connors. I know I'm not the voice of Midnight's Edge Robot Shlomo. He's having some storms in his area, so hopefully he'll be able to join us soon, considering he's one of the main reasons we're going early tonight. But we have a very special guest to take his place, at least for now, and hopefully maybe for the rest of the show if he's got time. Mr. Robert Meyer Burnett himself. How are you doing today, sir?
Well, it's a great honor to be here with the two of you. I really enjoy hanging out with you guys and chatting, talking Trek, as it were.
Yes.
Chatting about the final frontier, the utopian future we used to want to live in, but not anymore, perhaps.
Day for Trek, and you made the news, sir, so we'll get to that too. Before I do that, I got to introduce my co-host here, my partner in crime, Miss Mecha Random herself, the YouTube.
Oh, I got my theme music.
Of course, I've got your theme music. Why wouldn't I?
Does that mean I have to turn the camera on? Oh.
I don't know if Mr. Burnett's aware she has her own theme music.
Oh, she's the internet's favorite harpy.
That's right.
I know.
Okay. So, without any ado, let's just get into this. You broke some news earlier on your show, sir, and I'm just so excited you were able to make it here to talk to us about it.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I saw the Picard trailer, I found it strangely familiar. And I didn't know much about the show other than what we had seen. And it's very funny that in this trailer, for instance, they show a next-gen comm badge that was used in Voyager and in the TNG film series. And they show Picard looking at that comm badge as if that was his touchstone. And yet, in the ads for Star Trek Picard, it carved into his vineyard, they used the Delta, the chevron from the original series. So the marketing of this film, the branding of this movie is all over the place. They use the original Star Trek font, the Star Trek logo for this Picard show, when the original series logo was never, ever used in the promotion of Next Generation. And yet they're using it. It's Star Trek Picard, but it's not the TNG font that began every episode, 178 episodes of Star Trek, The Next Generation. It's very strange. I mean, what has happened to Star Trek to me is baffling, because in a world where branding is everything, the Star Trek, The Next Generation iconography is certainly not being honored in the Picard show. So that's always fascinated me. And the idea that the vineyard has become this iconic thing in their marketing, where we saw it in literally 2 episodes of TNG. And neither one of those episodes were places Picard really wanted to be at, but they were interesting because they gave us his backstory. And in this trailer, the first thing he says is, "I never felt at home here." And yet they've been hanging their marketing on this vineyard like, you know what? We saw family and all good things too. And it's amazing. There's 178 episodes, but it's like, oh, you can never go home again or something. Like, Picard never wanted to go home. He was an explorer from day one, practically. But anyway, be that as it may, when I saw the trailer for the Star Trek Picard series, my initial response to it was, this looks interesting. I find I like the show, but it was strangely reminiscent of things that I'd heard about before. And one of those things were, and Brian Fuller, who, by the way, despite what the credits say, Brian Fuller created Star Trek Discovery. He was the creator. No one else. I know it. He shares a co-creator with Alex Kurtzman, but at the time it was him. And as he told me many times, he was not bound by some make it 25% different. It was going to be canonical Star Trek. And I've seen a lot of the development of the show. I've even seen, like, I love the idea that the Macquarie Enterprise that he had been painting images of for the Star Trek Titans movie that Philip Kaufman was going to direct in the mid 70s was going to be used as the basis for the Discovery. I like that idea. I've actually held that study model that was made for the show, and the artwork that was done before he was unceremoniously dropped from that show.
Right.
All of it was very canonically accurate. Even Saru was very different than the Saru that made it to the screen. Of course, I've talked about how the tardigrade, as originally portrayed in the series, was a member of the crew, part of engineering. His name was Ephraim, and he worked with Stamets, and there was no spore drive. It was the spores came from the mycellular network, came from a terraforming effort, and it was all about terraforming technology. And this was an obsession with Brian himself that goes back to, well, it predates Hannibal, but there was an episode about mushrooms and Stamets and all of that in a first season episode of Hannibal. So all of this was dispensed with and gotten rid of, and all of what he did for Star Trek was sort of picked over, and they took the 13 episodes that he had beat out for the show initially, and there's about 150 pages of this material for Discovery, and since it was there, that it was when he was let go or whatever happened, even though it says the show was co-created by him, as should Star Trek Picard. The material was gone over and reworked, and basically, in my mind, dumbed down, if I could say.
Oh, I'll agree to that.
Yeah, it was dumbed down. And by the way, a lot of people are not talking about this, but one of my favorite Star Trek authors, David Mack, who has also contributed to canonical Star Trek with Deep Space Nine, he wrote a Star Trek novel called Section 31 Control. That was about AI and Section 31 and control. The latter half of season 2 of Discovery shamelessly mined all that material. He received no credit. Now, I understand it was a Star Trek novel published by Pocket Books, but still, like, come on. Even Marvel, as I said on my show, Marvel had Jim Starlin in Endgame. The creator of Thanos himself was part of the support group that Captain America is hosting in Endgame. The man who actually created Thanos appeared on screen in Endgame as part of the support group hosting. That's how you do things. So anyway, when I saw the trailer for Picard, it seemed strangely familiar to me. Now, Brian Fuller developed 5 different pieces for Star Trek when he was involved in the creation of Discovery. And one of those things was something he called Data and Picard. And I will read it to you. I will read to you what it says. This story begins after Ambassador Spock has disappeared into a rupture in the space-time continuum, creating the alternate timeline that contains the J.J. Abrams film universe. This tale takes place in the Prime universe, picking up with the Next Generation crew's adventures. The planet Romulus is experiencing a worldwide evacuation as its star is about to go supernova. Leading that evacuation is Captain Data, coordinating a massive effort with a fleet of starships. The Romulan star goes boom, its shockwave racing toward the planet and certain destruction. Captain Data thinks quickly, employing 7 of 9 and a fleet of Borg expats from the long-defeated Borg to save as many as possible with mass assimilation technology. It's a brilliant and terrifying move, and a questionable one. I would assume Brian was using that because how quickly people can be beamed away, as we saw in First Contact. The mission is... What's that?
He actually thought ahead of time on that, yeah.
Yeah. The mission is only a partial success, and those rescued were traumatized by Borg ships appearing in their atmosphere and scooping up Romulans as if they were being assimilated. This raises question in Data's leadership style and his insensitivity to organics. Meanwhile, Ambassador Picard is having a difficult time finding home for Romulan refugees. Their sister planet Vulcan wants nothing to do with them. And Starfleet has new concerns with Data's support of 7 of 9 and the Borg expats. Starfleet draws Picard into direct conflict with Data. Picard's concerns with the Borg are based on his abduction and imprisonment and brainwashing by the Borg, and his trust for Data, now a captain of considerable accomplishment, is being challenged. To make matters worse, Picard fears his Irumodic syndrome, the genetic disease sleeping in his cells, is waking up and loosening his own grip on reality. His only saving grace could come with the help of the Borg and returning to his time as Locutus of Borg to save the past and present and himself. So that was something that initially came from Brian Fuller. He apparently, it was related to me that he told me that it was registered with the WGA, the Writers Guild of America. And he also said he contacted both Brent Spiner and Jerry Ryan and spoke to them about this idea. So there you go.
So, wow. Has he expressed anything?
Brian said he pitched 5 series, and they have 2 of them in development and another based on an original character he created for Discovery. And so that's and Brian Fuller, I spoke with him today, and he said that I can say that he spoke with both Jerry Ryan and Brent Spiner about reprising their roles while he was still working on Star Trek.
And just before we went live, you also said the new trailer made him cry.
That's what he said. Yeah.
Wow.
And not in a good way, you said.
No. Yeah.
Well, first off, I would definitely watch the crap out of that show. That sounds amazing with the right writing and the right people making it without.
Well, what's interesting about that is what I like about his idea is, as I talked about on my own show today, I like the idea that I don't think they've ever really, the Borg are a stupid idea. I've always said that from the beginning. They were conceived. It was kind of dumb because, I mean, cyborg, it was the most rudimentary non-sci-fi way to introduce a antagonist. However, the way it was done with Q and Whoopi Goldberg, and the fact that they developed this backstory between Guinan and Q that we really didn't know anything about, you just knew they knew each other and they hated each other, which was really intriguing. And that Q, they used the Borg as like, you don't even know what's out there. So it was like this throwaway thing, but it was done really well on the show. And it was in the 2nd season in Q Who. That you can't, there's a Borg baby. I mean, it was really horrifying, but it was done sort of ham-fistedly, but that's fine. And then when they brought them back a season and a half later at the end of season 3 in Best of Both Worlds, they did such a great job of introducing these characters. But what I find sort of distressing, and they really dealt with this a lot in Voyager, is if you had races that are assimilated into the Borg collective, what does that mean? Like okay, like every single sentient life form in the universe can be incorporated into the Borg collective, and the fact that people can be removed. I mean, when they were able to get Locutus back and turn him back into Picard, that was a big deal. That means that all of the Borg can then be rescued. And if all of the Borg can be rescued, they're no longer expendable. These are innocent people that have been basically cooped up in a technological concentration camp and forced to do the bidding of whatever. And I was like, how did this happen? Of course, William Shatner and the Reeve Stevens dealt with the Borg in his book, The Return, which I thought was very interesting, what they did with that, and how the machine planet where V'ger came from was basically shown as being where the Borg originated. And it's sort of interesting to me that I always see the Borg as sort of it was us. We are the Borg. We in our quest to improve ourselves and make ourselves better. And it was an experiment that went awry, kind of like I mentioned in I Am Legend, a movie that Akiva Goldsman wrote based on Richard Matheson's seminal book, that in the movie they were looking for a cancer cure and it turned us all into vampires, which was unfortunate. But they dumbed it down. The book is actually quite intelligent, but the movies, the Omega Man is more intelligent than the Will Smith movie, even though I love the Will Smith film. So here's a really interesting way. So now you've got the Romulans were shown as having Borg technology as evidenced in the Countdown comic and in Star Trek 09. So to be fair, Brian Fuller was drawing upon ideas that were originally posited by Kurtzman and Orsi in the Countdown comic and in the Star Trek 09. But of course, Voyager was where they developed the Borg. Unimatrix Zero, 7 of 9. They did a lot of stuff with the Borg that Brian was also, he was taking what he had literally worked on as a writer-producer on Star Trek, and he was furthering that in his idea, but trying to make it canonical using the Countdown comic and Star Trek 09 also. And I liked the Countdown comic, and I liked that element of how they incorporated that into Star Trek 09, which I did not like, famously. I mean, I've come out because Star Trek 09 is a brain dead movie. I love the cast, but the rest of the film is just it's mindless and brain dead and it's dumb. They literally make a joke where the computer does not understand Anton Yelchin's accent. Anton Yelchin is an actual Russian who spoke Russian, but they saddled him with a bad Russian accent to make a joke with the ship's computer. In the Star Trek universe, we know Walter Koenig is not perhaps the best person to portray a Russian accent. But the joke with Chekhov was not that we never believed he wasn't Russian. The joke was that he would say that everything great in the world was created in Russia. So when you see Anton Yelchin being saddled as a real Russian with a bad accent, you've broken the fourth wall to me. You don't understand the very essence of these characters. And that was Star Trek 09 to a T. It was all of these bad, breaking the fourth wall jokes the whole time. And I couldn't take it seriously.
Well, it was made for an audience who wasn't really a Star Trek fan. That's what it was. Sorry, I didn't.
No. You're absolutely right. It's like the way my mom, and my mom was a great supporter of me as a Star Trek fan, but the way she understands Star Trek was basically, and I get it, they want to appeal to the widest amount of people, but I don't think they necessarily did that. But it's the same thing that happened, I think, with the original material that Brian worked on, the outlines he worked on for Discovery. All of that he was dispensed with, and all of what he was trying to create. And I'm not saying I'm a fan of all of it. I don't agree with necessarily everything he was going to do, but I think that there was a keen wit and intelligence and understanding of Star Trek that he had brought to what he was trying to do with Discovery that was completely dispensed with. And it was interesting because at the same time they were pitching multiple shows. They're trying to, of course, give us more Star Trek. And it's interesting that the basis of his Picard pitch, the Data Picard show that he had pitched, that was all about the Borg and the Romulans, and it was trying to bring together what happened in Star Trek 09 and also what happened in the latter seasons of Voyager together with the extra added spin of now Picard had been done, and he had done it. He had suggested it, and he's not involved with this show, nor is he credited on it at all.
Right. And for those joining us late, like Mr. Robot Shlomo himself, the voice of Midnight's Edge. Hello, Robot.
Hi, how's it going? Hello, Mr. Burnett. How you doing?
Hello.
Yeah, I got some thunderstorms in my area. I nearly lost power twice. So I'm trying to keep one eye on the weather map and pay attention to the conversation at the same time here. So hopefully that's moved off into the distance. So
but yeah, what we're covering
knock on wood.
What we're covering here for those joining us late is that Mr. Burnett has revealed today on his show, which you can check out on the Burnett Work.
By the way, not my best show. Even a friend of mine said, dude, are you okay? I'm like, I was at Comic-Con all weekend. I was exhausted. I was sunburned. I was a little droopy. I mean, I perhaps didn't look my best. And I didn't even convey what I liked and didn't like. I mean, to be honest, I just want to say I liked what the Picard trailer was dishing out.
Surprisingly, most of us too. Actually.
I did, even though, listening to Doomcock talk about it made me laugh. I didn't even get to finish because I saw your thing pop up and I'm like, oh, I'm going to see what you guys have to say. I mean, everybody, here's the thing. I think everyone on the planet Earth, even someone like myself who hates Star Trek Discovery. I hate everything about that show. There's nothing about it that I don't loathe with every fiber of my existence. When I saw the Picard trailer, I want to love it. I want this show to be great. I want to love everything about it. I love Patrick Stewart. I love Next Generation. I spent 3 years of my life making documentaries about Next Generation, which, by the way, you can buy if you buy the entire series on Blu-ray. For those of you, I know Blu-rays are great. Putting discs in a machine is so 20th century. I get it. Nobody wants this show to be bad. The entire planet Earth wants to love Picard, and so do I. I want it to be great. I just need to say that.
Exactly. I know, we're especially harsh critics on Discovery. I've probably said much worse things about it than probably anybody here. But, I want Picard to be good. I want to have those little nerdgasms. I want to geek out. I want to be squeeing when I see Data and 7 of 9 on screen again. And I want it to be good. I just really, really, really want good Star Trek again.
Yeah, we all want Star Trek to be good again. I keep coming, and the thing is, and as I say, and Rob, you're a Robotech fan, right?
Dude, so much so.
There's a line actually in one of the final episodes where the Invid Regis says the malignant shadow of the Robotech masters hangs over this world, and that's what I keep thinking about every time I see anything new with Star Trek on it. The malignant shadow of this current crop of writers, Alex Kurtzman and Kiva Goldsman. Yeah, okay, maybe unfair to say call them malignant, but everything they do permeates anything I see with Star Trek. I'm like, yeah, you know what? I'm not buying it. I'm just not buying it.
Well, so, just to say that you got Michael Chabon. I say Chabon. I still don't have a how do you pronounce his name correctly? Michael Chabon is an incredibly talented writer.
Oh yeah,
he's Pulitzer Prize winning. I own a number of his books, but I don't know. He's now producing TV. And Kirsten Beyer, her Voyager novels are great. Like she's a huge Star Trek fan, and I can only imagine they probably put her in the corner, like Jack Horner, like the corner of the writing room, just sitting there twiddling her thumbs, wishing like, why won't anyone listen to me? Because I know a hell of a lot more about this entire franchise than you do. But apparently, she had one of the original pitches for the show, and yet I'm sure she's marginalized by everybody vying for control. What I'm missing this weekend, I watched a man, Kevin Feige, stand up and I didn't see it. I wasn't actually in the room, but I was listening to it in real time in a hotel room, and what the Marvel Cinematic Universe has done with 23 movies is they don't directly maybe necessarily honor it, but they look back to their comic book origins. Winter Soldier was based on Ed Brubaker's great run in Captain America. They look back at this. They understand what's going on. They also understand they're making movies. They can't just directly translate comics. But there's a real love and understanding. And Kevin Feige worked on 13 Marvel-based properties before the MCU, whether it was Ghost Rider, Raimi's Spider-Man movies, Bryan Singer's X-Men movies, Daredevil. I mean, he saw what worked and what didn't. And he spent 11 years and made 23 movies. And if you break it down, they made $1 billion each if you average it out. This is an unparalleled, unprecedented track record. And yet, why can't we have a Kevin Feige who's heading up Star Trek? Why don't we have somebody?
Well, they think they have Kevin Feige, and his name's Alex Kurtzman. That was the problem.
Because they decided to blackball you. That's why you should be doing this shit.
Here's the thing. I mean,
and everybody agrees.
I don't have. Here's the problem. I have a middling professional career in the entertainment business. If I had any kind of real professional success as a director or as a producer, I mean, I've been eking out a living, but I've never achieved the kind of success that warrants being put in charge of any of these things. I admit that. I mean, I have no problem.
You should still be in the room. I'll argue that.
But even if I was in the room, I would be like Kirsten Beyer. I would be the guy sitting in the corner, shouting and yelling and screaming, and then nobody would listen to me. And what you need is somebody. You need an impresario. You need a Ringling Brothers. You need P.T. Barnum. You need somebody that everybody listens to, that knows how to put on a show, that isn't just taking the next job.
You need almost like a big personality to go along with.
You need a big personality that has the power to wield, that also loves Star Trek. And what's interesting is, I don't know if that person can exist in this world.
Well, you know, Brian Fuller, do you think he could have handled it if they would have allowed him to do it?
Well, as much as, look, I love Brian, and I think Hannibal is one of the greatest, if not the greatest, horror television series ever. There's a book on the making of Hannibal, The Art of Hannibal. And, you know, Brian is an iconoclast. He wants things the way he wants it. He's a real, the guy knows everything about fashion, about design. When he makes a show like Hannibal, it's an amazing bit of television. Now, I've never worked with Brian. I am sure, and I don't think Brian would get mad if I said this, that he's an enormous pain in the ass to work with. I am sure Brian is an enormous pain in the ass because he wants what he wants, how he wants it. And that's what you want in a visionary producer.
I was just going to say, you just described a visionary. So there's nothing wrong with that. That's what Feige is. And that's what Star Trek needs, is its own Kevin Feige. So, okay, then, not to push you forward though, if Brian's not the one, who would you say should
I think honestly, I think Brian would have been the closest to that, because he is a television producer who does have, it's not just Hannibal, what is it, Pushing Daisies. I mean, he's got a lot of really unique, Brian Fuller has what is most unique, and that is a voice. And that is a point of view, a very strong point of view. I mean, the first season of American Gods, and I know that he worked with Michael Green doing that. I think that was an amazing first season of television. And I know that in the second season, they didn't want to give him the budget he wants, because what Brian wants is not cheap. You know, it isn't cheap. And what's interesting is Brian even told me that Les Moonves told him, why can't you do Star Trek for $1 million an episode like the original series? Why does it have to be so expensive? And what's ironic about that is the people that took over from Brian turned Star Trek into one of the most expensive. The first two seasons of Discovery are two of the most expensive seasons of television ever produced in the history of the medium. And the amount of money that they're paying for the show, because they're making what they think are feature films. And it's amazing. And
that's funny you mentioned that, because one of the things I've heard the most go around about Picard is that how cheap it looks, when this is one of the biggest productions probably ever in television, almost.
Right. Well, Tom, do you think most of it is tied up in like Patrick Stewart's salary and the fact that they're shooting in LA? I mean,
I think part of the reason he's an executive producer is so they can curtail that, and he gets paid on the back end of whatever Amazon threw in for the show. That's the other thing. Amazon supposedly threw a bunch of money at this too, but they were also according to what we heard through rumors, were the ones that asked for reshoots, which we pretty much got proof now that there was reshoots because the show got pushed to 2020, just like we had reported it was probably, or rumored it was going to. And obviously a lot of these people that are on board for Star Trek probably weren't before, because we just heard about Brent Spiner, what was it, in May?
Right.
Yeah, it was a few weeks ago. Yeah.
And then we got all, 7 of 9 and all these other people that are in there, and now we kind of all figured that in the very least we were going to get, what's his face, Jonathan Frakes, because he's directing a whole batch of episodes. Then we find out Marina Sirtis is in there, and that opens the door for other possibilities. And there's other people who have brought up being on the show. We'll probably bring that up later if we get to that. That might still show up. But again, this is one of those things where fans want this. I just think it's interesting that you brought up this whole thing with Brian Fuller pitch this idea. Now, do you think he has any legal ground to stand on? Has he said anything to you that implied that he might take any kind of action?
No, not at all. I mean, this is not uncommon in the development of shows. It's not uncommon, but Brian Fuller really cares about Star Trek and all of this stuff. And see, the difference is that Brian Fuller is not a creator where it's just a job.
Right. And I can tell you're mostly just trying to get the word out there, but I didn't know if he had any plans. But sorry, continue.
No, not at all. I mean, I don't speak for Brian. I think it should be known that I don't. I've admired him. I've known him casually over the years. I mean, it's when The Force Awakens was opening, I went to Toys R Us for Force Friday to buy toys. And, Brian Fuller shows up and he's in line and I'm like, dude, and he comes in and we stand in line together. It's not like I go to his house. I don't have any loyalty necessarily to him. I have an immense respect for him as a producer, as a writer, as a creator, and as a visionary.
Well, I can honestly say you've never really said too much bad about very many people in the industry outside of a few. So sorry.
No, well, but I admire so many people in the industry.
Yeah, right. That's what I'm saying. You have a lot of respect for him. Yeah.
Yeah, I have an enormous respect for him, and I really liked. Do I think everything he wanted to do with Star Trek Discovery was perfect? No. I still there's things that he created that were retained, like the Klingon sarcophagus ship and all that, and they're just things that I would object to canonically as a geeky Star Trek fan. But I think if you read for instance, his first draft of what he called Qapla', that was later called the Vulcan Hello, that it was an interesting. The dialogue was much smarter and it felt more like Star Trek because he had written Star Trek. And I think that, when you hire somebody, as you hire any visionary in the business, what you're getting is somebody that's going to give it 110%, and they live and they breathe this material. That's what you want. Like an Aaron Sorkin doing the first 4 seasons of West Wing, or J. Michael Straczynski doing Babylon 5. What you want, especially for genre shows, whether it's Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Joss Whedon, or whether it's The Expanse, or whatever it is, the best television is created by people who it's a crusade for them. It's not just a job. They're not trying. They don't think of it and go, "Ooh, look at how lucrative this is." I get that. Everybody wants to get paid, but the best people to create entertainment are the people that believe. You want the fanatics. You want the people that are going to create things. Matt Weiner, who created Mad Men. When I was doing Free Enterprise 2, our offices were at LA Center Studios, and I used to watch him. He would pace outside my office window, and he would sit there and he'd smoke cigarettes, and he would just be he would be on the phone, or he wouldn't be on the phone. He was just pacing for long periods of time, and you could tell that all he was doing was trying to make Mad Men better. He was and I was watching him, and we lost the financing, made for Enterprise 2, but for 6 months we were in our offices in pre-production. It was great. But I used to look out my window at LA Center Studios and watch Matt Weiner pace. And I was inspired by that. I'm like, I want to be that guy. I want to be somebody that's so, he wasn't out there running around. He was there on the lot pacing for hours. And I knew that the only thing that he was thinking about was trying to make his show the best it could be. I'm like, and look what we got. We got some of the best television ever made. And that was because of him, because he believed, man. That guy was, I saw it myself, and I'm like, I aspired to be that guy. I want to be Matthew Weiner. I want to have the ability that someone's given me money where I can make a show where I spend my days obsessing over every element of that program. I think Brian Fuller is exactly the same way. I mean, you read this book on the making of Hannibal, and that kind of obsession and that kind of creativity inspires me. And I would love to see that in a creator of Star Trek.
And that's actually kind of a perfect segue into our next part, if you can stick around for just a little longer.
Sure.
And that's the big thing, is a visionary. And one thing I don't know, well, J.J. Abrams is a visionary. But one thing I'm not so sure about is if he really even knows his own vision of Star Trek. Now, I don't know if you've had a chance, Robert and Rob, I think you did, and Mecca I know did. I don't know if you got a chance to hear this yet, but we're going to play a little clip from Tarantino himself talking about Star Trek and the process of working with J.J. Abrams. Now, I can't wait to hear your reaction to this. This is hilarious.
Oh, I can't wait to hear this.
Okay, so I'm going to cue this up here, guys. So here we go. And then we might stop it in between to comment, but it's like 3 minutes long, and it's Tarantino going, so it's kind of hard to interrupt him, but we'll try. So here we go.
What was, I know there's this Star Trek project potentially still out there that was, correct me if I'm wrong, story idea by you, someone else has scripted it?
Well, it's an idea that an idea I had. Then we got together and talked it out, and then we hired Mark Smith, who did Revenant, to write the script.
So where's that at? Just as a Star Trek fan and as a fan of yours, I'm just like fascinated. Is that like, what is that, as much as you can say? Like, is it in the current timeline? Is it, you're a fan of the original series, I know.
Yeah.
So what is it?
Yeah, it's like I don't know how much I can say. The one thing I can say is it would deal with the Chris Pine timeline. Now, I still don't quite understand, and JJ can't explain it to me. Whatever, and my editor has tried to explain it to me, and I still don't get it. All right, Fred Baskin, about something happened in the first movie that now kind of wiped the slate clean.
Right.
I don't buy that. I don't like it. I don't appreciate it. I don't. Fuck that. All right. I don't like that. You know,
I'm going to lead you down a road. You want the Guardian of Forever to have happened, don't you?
Yeah, I want the whole series to have happened.
Okay. Now I got to stop that there, because I'm sure Rob, our ROBB, just gained a multitude of respect for Tarantino after he said that.
Now that you watch Reservoir Dogs with me.
Yeah. Well,
I'll think about it.
No, go ahead.
Rob, you were going to say something. No, she just asked if he'd watch Reservoir, because Rob's the biggest Tarantino fan. So anyway, go ahead, Rob.
First of all, Reservoir Dogs is still my favorite Tarantino movie. I know it's based on Ringo Lamb.
Me too. See, now we just need to get Shlomo involved in the Tarantino, love, because I've never seen a movie of his that I've disliked, I don't think. And some of them are not like my favorites, but yeah, Reservoir Dogs is still really, really good. So,
someone asked me how could I. Someone asked me not that long. They always ask me how can you not seen Pulp Fiction? Here's how. Well, when it was playing in the theaters, I was somewhere else. That's how I wasn't. I never saw it.
Well, I think the thing about Tarantino movies that, look, even if you don't understand anything about his references or what he's doing, his films are beautifully made. The craft is impeccable. The acting is terrific. they're just wildly entertaining. That's what I think about Tarantino films. I mean, if you look at the independent film boom of the late 80s and early 90s, I think Reservoir Dogs was 1992, and it was shot widescreen. It had an incredible ensemble of actors that had cult credibility, and new actors like Tim Roth. And when you watch it, it's a heist movie where you don't see the heist. And it does interesting things with time, and it was such a blast of I don't know what you call it, a blast of creative uniqueness at the time that had this vast knowledge of cinema history contained within it. That to me, when I watch it, I didn't see it in the theater. I first saw Reservoir Dogs when I bought it on Laserdisc, and I brought it home and I watched it twice in one day, and it blew me away. The whole thing blew me away because I love crime thrillers and heist movies, and I was like, this is a voice. I mean, we had Soderbergh putting out Sex, Lies, and Videotape in the late 80s, and then in the early 90s you had a blast of really interesting independent films, and then Tarantino came on the scene with Reservoir Dogs, and he's all about character. His movies are character. He loves characters, and yeah, sometimes I'm always talking about verisimilitude, and he writes things that have that are not necessarily set in the real world. They're set in Tarantino world. I think Jackie Brown is the closest thing he ever came to the real world, but I think he's got what he understands is the essence of genre. He's able to distill, though I don't think Tarantino would make a very good canonical Star Trek movie. I really don't, because I don't think he doesn't know Star Trek canon enough. But what he gets is he could distill the essence of why we all love Star Trek. And if you let him do what he's going to do, he would give us, I think, an incredibly unique take on what Star Trek is, not as canonical Star Trek that would fit necessarily in any part of canon. He would give us a one shot. I would maybe call it an Elseworlds tale if you're a DC Comics fan. He literally would give us Tarantino's Star Trek, and there's a great video online you can see somebody made that takes Tarantino's tropes and puts them into the Star Trek format. But I think he would distill Star Trek as a franchise into something that was wildly entertaining and a lot of fun to watch, that's brilliantly written, probably shot by Robbie Richardson, so it's going to look amazing. But it would distill everything we love about Star Trek into this unique Tarantino package. At least that's the way I look at it. So the idea of where he, like when Tarantino says, if you talk to him about, well, there's the Kelvin timeline and Prime Spock, because of what happened with the whole supernova and all, Tarantino would be like, what? I don't care. You know, he's like,
pretty much what he said. I don't like that. Fuck that. You know,
yeah, Tarantino, Star Trek to Tarantino is, even though he's brought up Yesterday's Enterprise in interviews and he's aware of it, but for Tarantino, he grew up in his formative years. All of what he's made is all about what he watched in his formative years. So it's all about the original series. It's all about 66 to 69, classic Trek, all about that. And so what we're going to get is the Once Upon a Time in Hollywood version of Star Trek. And let me tell you, I would pay $100 to see to have a ticket to go see that film.
Well,
because
actually,
I think it'd be amazing.
Here, that's a perfect segue into the last part of this clip, and we might as well just get it out of the way. Then he kind of explains what he would do and what he wants to do. So here we go.
All right, it just hasn't happened yet.
Yes.
And no, Benedict Cumberbatch or whatever his name is. All right, it's not Khan.
Yeah.
All right, Khan is Khan. And I told JJ, I go, like, I don't understand this. I don't like it. And then they like, ignore it. Nobody likes it. I don't understand it. I just do whatever you want. If you want it to happen the exact way it happened on the series, it can.
So that's more in line with what you're honoring the series that you loved and came up with.
Yes, exactly.
So.
Yeah, I mean that, and ultimately why I would be interested. If somebody asked me, like, okay, well, what is it about Star Trek that you like?
Yeah.
Easy. William Shatner. I love William Shatner as James T. Kirk.
man.
That's why I like Star Trek.
Yeah.
The
Yeah, you pretty
reason
much
I
said
like
what
Star
you
Trek
said,
more
yeah.
than Star Wars is because William Shatner is in Star Wars. William Shatner, especially as I actually like William Shatner in almost everything, but William Shatner as James T. Kirk is that is my connection. That is why I like it. Like, I liked CSI because I liked William Peterson as Gus Grissom. And so the reason I was actually intrigued by the J.J. Abrams version of it is because I thought Chris Pine did a fantastic job, not just playing Captain Kirk, but playing William Shatner's captain. He is William Shatner.
Yes.
He's not just another guy. He's William Shatner's Captain Kirk. And it's literally, Zachary Quinto is literally Leonard Nimoy's, because they both in the same scene together. He's his Spock. And they fucking nail it.
They did.
They just nail it.
All right, so that's the end of that. So Robert, he pretty much said what you were saying. For the most part, that he's inspired by the original. If he were to do it, yeah, he'd use Chris Pine and all that stuff, but he'd totally ignore the Kelvin timeline. And again, it goes to show what we were saying with our reporting before, where JJ's like, "Who gives a shit? Nobody likes it anyway. Just do what you want to do." All that has to do with merchandising, and it's a failure. It's been nothing but a failure. Just like we keep telling people, like,
Can you believe J.J. Abrams would actually say nobody else likes it either?
I do. If Tarantino says
that's a $300 million investment on the part of the studio.
Threw JJ under the goddamn bus right there is what he did. What's your opinion on that, Rob? I got to hear that. Do you think he's lying or do you think he's telling the truth?
No, I don't. Because Quentin Tarantino doesn't care. He's the only. I think there are three filmmakers working today, and even though one of them is an American, I would say there's three filmmakers who are making cinema still that is unfettered by the constraints of money, even though all filmmaking is. One is Christopher Nolan, the other is Martin Scorsese, and the third is Quentin Tarantino. Because Quentin Tarantino hasn't made a $200 million movie, so he's pretty much a good bet. Martin Scorsese has been up and down, but it's still Martin Scorsese. Everybody loves him. And Christopher Nolan, he comes up and goes, "Yeah, mate, I really want to." That's an Australian accent. I can't do his erudite British accent, but I'm sure Christopher Nolan said, "I'd like to make." He goes to Warner Brothers. I mean, the guy doesn't even have a cell phone. Apparently, he's like, "I would like to make a movie about Dunkirk, which is a big thing that happened for the Brits in World War II, and it's not going to be that expensive, but I want to shoot it practically and all this." And Warner Brothers is like, "Sure, whatever." Like Inception, I'm sure nobody knew what the hell was going on. Warner Brothers marketing thought Inception was going to be a disaster. He made Dark Knight. It made like $1 billion. Inception makes like almost 900 million. Even Dunkirk, a movie that is about an event in British World War II history that Americans know nothing about, even Dunkirk makes almost $500 million. Christopher Nolan is a guy that, like, now he's making a movie called Tenet, whatever that is. It's not Roman Polanski's The Tenet, but I'm sure they're just like, "It's your most expensive movie, Christopher? You want $200 million or 225? Yes, here, let me write the check." Christopher Nolan, Martin Scorsese, and Quentin Tarantino, these are filmmakers that are still making pure cinema. They're not, the studios don't even, they read the scripts like, whatever, we don't get it. We just know that they've never failed. They're always going to win for us. I mean, Martin Scorsese has been up and down, but everyone loves him. Who doesn't want to make a Martin Scorsese movie? But so when Quentin Tarantino's talking, it just makes me sad to hear that J.J. Abrams was like, even I don't understand. I had to listen to Star Trek 09 when it was coming out a decade ago. In every interview, he would say, "I was never a Star Trek fan." That's what he would say. And I'm like, wow. I've been a Star Trek fan literally since I was 5 years old. And I have to listen to the director of the new Star Trek movie talk about how he doesn't like Star Trek. He's never been a fan. It was painful. The one movie I did direct that stars William Shatner, Quentin Tarantino sat in front of me at a screening at the Hawaii International Film Festival. And at the after party, he'd seen the movie once. He cornered me and talked to me for like 2 hours. And he knew every line of dialogue that William Shatner said in the film. And all he wanted to know for 2 hours was what it was like to direct William Shatner.
He loves William Shatner. You can tell.
He loves William, and I do too. I love William Shatner too. And I feel like he does about Star Trek. And yeah, and I agree. I thought Chris Pine did a great job. I thought how it was written was terrible. The Kobayashi Maru scene in the film is embarrassing. And it betrays everything. But I don't blame Chris Pine for that. It was how he was written and directed. I mean,
Jay who didn't know what the fuck he was doing because Jason said that. There's stuff in Star Trek 09 I liked. I liked the whole opening 10 minutes on the Kelvin. I really enjoyed that. And I thought it was really well done. I liked Rabau until Nero shows up and kills him. Like, why would you do that? By the way, can I just say as an aside, Nero is the single dumbest villain in the history of all science fiction.
Right?
Just as an aside, that guy, he's mad because Romulus was destroyed because of a supernova. He finds himself 85 years in the past or whatever it is. And rather than go to his homeworld in a ship that's 85 years in the past and warn everybody and go, hey, you guys, listen, I traveled through time, but in 85 years, our sun is going to go nova, destroy the homeworld. Just be mindful of that. No, rather than that, he apparently, we don't see it, but off camera, he gets thrown into a Klingon prison for 25 years. But forget about that because it wasn't in the film. It's on the deleted scenes on the DVD. But he doesn't go warn his home planet about the very thing that has pissed him off. The thing that killed his wife. It's like, what? Don't they have Back to the Future on Romulus? Didn't somebody make a science fiction movie where they went through some kind of a time travel? I know in real life, Nero was like a miner. He mined things. That's why they had a mining ship that had Borg technology. But
he's also not the first person to time travel in the Star Trek universe either.
Yeah, and you're like, dude, why don't you go warn? If you want to get mad at the Federation, you could you're back in time. That's why Captain Rabal comes over to his ship and he's like, where's the location of Admiral Spock or Ambassador Spock? I mean, that would be like if somebody came down from Sacramento and found me on a street corner and asked where their best friend who lived in Sacramento was. I'm like, dude, I haven't been to Sacramento in 25 years. I don't know where your best friend is. And he would be angry with me and skewer me through the heart. They were asking him, do you know where Ambassador Spock is? They didn't sit there and go, oh, we've gone back in time 85 years. Maybe they wouldn't know where Ambassador Spock is because he's not even an ambassador yet. It was so brain dead. Anyway, that's just an aside. That's
the level of writing, though. You have and in Into Darkness, you have the ship hiding in the ocean when they could be in orbit. Did they forget?
Let's not even start on Into Darkness. We'll be here all fucking night.
Yeah, I know. Okay.
I mean, how about the fact that they're trying to save people? They don't want to see them. How about not be in geosynchronous orbit about where those people are? It's not like they can tell the difference between a satellite or a starship in orbit. But no. We're going to land in the ocean close to where you live. So we can have a joke where Simon Pegg looks at the view screen when a giant fish swims by and do a double take. I hate that movie.
We all do.
Well, before we lose you, Robert, we did have some super chats, and I want to keep you because a couple of them had to do with you.
I'll stay. I'm enjoying this. I've got time.
Okay, good. Well, before we Rob might have to check out here, don't you?
Yeah, I have another stream to be on, but Rob, it's yeah.
He's again on this other stream. That's why we're a half hour early tonight.
Yeah.
But that's all right. He can check out, and we'll continue, and we will wrap when we do. So thanks for joining.
Thanks for joining. Thanks for being a guest on my own show. Jeez.
Right.
Rob,
like Picard.
Yeah, just like Picard. Rob, hopefully in the future we can actually talk Robotech on the stream here. because I have very few people to talk about that with. So,
oh my God, I had a conversation with the man who founded Toynami, the toy company Toynami at Comic-Con. We talked for like an hour, all about getting the Robotech license, and I'm a Veritech fiend, and I love my transformable Veritechs. I actually have a for the 30th anniversary, a Japanese company made motorcycle helmets, real motorcycle helmets of all of the Macross, the characters, and I had to buy a Roy Fokker motorcycle helmet. I don't have a motorcycle. I've never ridden a motorcycle, but I have an actual Roy Fokker motorcycle helmet that I spent $500 on that says UN Spacey and has it's dope. I love it so much. I'm a fiend for Macross. Robotech.
Yeah. Well, Macross, yeah. That's actually, yeah, like I said, I have very few people. We don't get to cover it a lot. So hopefully as the movie possibly draws
one of these days, we'll just let you two
go.
I'm in.
All right.
Yeah. Well, anyway, like thanks for joining us. Like I said, I gotta be on another stream. I'll check you guys out later. Tom, I'll check you out in a few minutes.
Sounds good. I'll be there when I can get there.
All right. Cool. All right. Thanks a lot.
All right. So Rob, before we get into the super chats, a couple people brought up Ronald D. Moore and Nick Meyer as Star Trek runners. What do you think of them as possibilities?
Well, here's the thing. Nick Meyer is an interesting cat because I'm a huge fan of his, but he knew nothing about Star Trek when he took over Star Trek II. And famously, Gene Roddenberry told him, watch or read Horatio Hornblower, read the books, and Star Trek is not difficult to understand because, like all great science fiction, it has its basis in literature, and Star Trek is Horatio Hornblower set in space, basically. So Nick Meyer is a very learned guy. He had made Time After Time, and he'd written the 7% Solution. So he's a very smart guy, came from a very smart family. And so he was given episodes of Star Trek to watch. And of course, he rewrote, he doesn't get screenplay credit for Star Trek II, which people don't realize, but he rewrote the entire script in basically 2 weeks. And they shot his script. And he, by the way, he was working on Star Trek Discovery with Brian Fuller, and he wrote the second episode of the series that was completely rewritten, and I don't believe he received screenplay credit. I think he was completely rewritten after Brian.
Yeah, I think all he got was a credit for consultant or whatever.
Yeah, well, if you might find, I know you guys might find something floating around that he is credited on as writing.
Right.
You might, if you come across it somewhere.
It's been rumored that he wrote one of the episodes. Yes,
he did. He wrote a script, and Brian Fuller and Nick Meyer wrote the first 2 episodes of Discovery. They of course were rewritten because that's what people do. Because when you get your name on a television screenplay, it's a very lucrative proposition. Or television, I should call it a teleplay.
Right. Well, and what was funny, when I talked to him, he, we asked him, like, I asked him, what was your contribution? And he couldn't even tell me. He was like very vague about everything. He's like,
they can't. They can't. I mean, it's contractual obligations. Look, it's all about money. How many producers in the first season of Discovery?
Was it 21 or 27?
I mean, that's insane.
Over 20. Yeah, it's over 20.
That's insanity. It's insanity. And think about it. How many? Just take those producers who are all getting paid. How much money is shelled out before one frame of, or one frame that is digitally captured now is shot? So it's always frustrating. It's always frustrating to see that, especially because whether you like the Rick Berman era of Star Trek or not, the man produced 25 seasons of Star Trek on time and on budget. So you'd think if you're going to make a new Star Trek show, whether you like Rick Berman as a creative entity or not, as a functioning, effectual producer, I would have gone, wow, dude, you produced 25 seasons of Star Trek. What do we need to know about producing Star Trek on a weekly basis? Is there things you can just hire him as a consultant? If nothing else, physical production. He oversaw the physical production of every episode of TNG, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, and Enterprise. He was in the edit bay. He oversaw it all. And while perhaps he might not have been the best creative person for Star Trek, he kept the trains running. And without him, we wouldn't have 25 seasons of Star Trek. But they didn't do that. And
well, he went and helped Alti Orville. So Ronald D. Moore was the other one they mentioned.
I love Ron Moore. You know, I think Ron Moore, of course, did Battlestar Galactica. He worked on Next Generation, Deep Space Nine. He's a terrific guy, great visionary. He's doing Outlander now, right? I think he's still in Outlander.
I think so. I have to look.
He's great. I mean, he totally gets Star Trek. I don't know if he would want to come back. Here's the problem. All of these creative entities, they all want to create their own things.
Yeah.
Ron Moore, I mean, even Battlestar Galactica, it was a remake, but Outlander, he found it is based on a series of books, I believe. You know, that's his own thing. All these creators want to create their own stuff. The problem with Star Trek when it comes to creative entities in Hollywood is because it's not yours, you didn't create it. That is a drawback. And if you're going to work in television and you're going to make something, you want it to be your own. And Star Trek has been around for 50 years, and everyone knows no matter how great your Star Trek is, the world at large is always going to know it as Gene Roddenberry's Star Trek, no matter what. So as a creator, and also Star Trek now has 50 plus years of rights deals, and it's really problematic. You need somebody, and I don't know if this person exists. I mean, I do, but again, as I told you, I don't have the credibility. I don't have the juice in Hollywood to get this done. But I would be somebody that would be content to spend the rest of my life making Star Trek and not care. I would just want to make great Star Trek. I know who I would hire, and I would be able to find the best people and shepherd a Star Trek series. But as far as the industry is concerned, I will never get that opportunity unless I somehow make another film and break through and become a creative visionary in one or two movies. But the world has changed, and I don't know if that's ever going to happen for me. And that's cool. I'm self-aware enough to know that that's the case. But everybody else is looking to get paid. Star Trek is just another stepping stone. The reason Bad Robot wanted it in the first place was because it was a franchise that was already viable in both the big screen and the small screen. Star Trek, they were making all through the 90s, they were making movies and television at the same time. They had 2 television shows going for most of the 90s and making feature films and an incredible merchandising empire. Anybody wants a piece of that. And what happened was Bad Robot found out that what they thought they were going to be able to do by getting involved and calling their own shots was they would be able to get rid of everything that had come before them. And they thought they were going to reinvent Star Trek in their own image, beginning with the merchandising. And that didn't all work. That didn't work out. And that was a mistake. And anybody who's coming in on Star Trek has to understand that they are never going to be the primary creative force. They're trying to do that now. But, you know, Alex Kurtzman is trying to do that, but there's no, again, unifying vision. Even the animated stuff, as talented as the people working on that animated show are, the very idea of doing comedic Star Trek, they're trying to build a universe first. They're looking at Star Trek, and the Burnett axiom, what I always say is, never put your universe before your characters or your story. And what they are trying to do is they're trying to build Star Trek out as a universe and a franchise before they've earned the ability and the right to do so. And they think that Picard, being that he's already, I mean, there's no better thing they could do than go back and get Patrick Stewart. From a business standpoint, it was very shrewd, and they did a great job. But their mistake is, I think, they think just because they got Patrick Stewart that it's going to work, that everybody's going to love them. And no, for Star Trek to work, Star Trek has to be great. You have to have great characters and a great story, and relying so much on getting Patrick Stewart, and we're going to get Patrick Stewart and the Borg, the most beloved elements of Star Trek ever, on a spreadsheet that looks good. In practice, just because you have a lightsaber doesn't mean you know how to wield it. And that's the problem. Right. That's the problem. They don't know how to wield their lightsaber.
Yeah.
You're crossing streams, but I like it. J-Rob, thank you so much for the €2 contribution, because we are demonetized as always. Hello, everyone, he says, and hello to you, J-Rob. C. Kenteni 28 gave us $2, says, I want Star Trek Tardigrade partner show by RMB. Well, he's kind of covered the feelings on that, but what would you say to that?
Well, I mean, I find it, as far as the Tardigrade lawsuit is concerned, in the original conception, in Brian Fuller's original conception of a Tardigrade member, the Tardigrade was a character on the Enterprise. He was Stamets Chewbacca, essentially. His name was Ephraim. He was a crew member on the Enterprise, and he worked in engineering, and he was a genius. And I like Brian Fuller's a huge Star Trek or Star Wars fan as well. I like the idea of having a very alien on the Enterprise as a crew member, and that's how he was conceived. What's really interesting is that the game version of Tardigrades is very different than Brian Fuller's conception of the Tardigrade crew member, because anybody who is on the internet, there was that video, I don't know, it was like 10 years ago, early on, what a Tardigrade was, and we all watched it. I mean, you could see it, and I'm sure Brian was inspired by seeing that because of science and all that. The Tardigrade is an indestructible life form. It can live in space and all that. It makes sense. Well, when Brian leaves the show, all of the new people that have come in, including Akiva Goldsman, looks at these elements and they're like, I've got to make this element mine. Somebody punches in Tardigrades into a Google search, and what comes up? That Tardigrade video game. And you look at that and you're like, look at all these elements, these ready-made elements. So Ephraim, the former Discovery crew member, gets morphed into something that is based on a cursory Google search on the internet. And I find it pretty suspect. I think if you would ask me, it's somebody watched Dune. It's a cross between that video game and Dune. All of those elements are there. And if you read Brian Fuller's original outlines for Star Trek Discovery, it's nothing like the video game. It's what a Tardigrade is, and yet when he was let go, isn't it interesting that the Tardigrade concept in Discovery morphed into something that a cursory Google search would bring you to?
That makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. It's a very simple, easy answer.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that look, creatives are just as apt to do Google searches and rewrite something for their reports as a fifth grader is, because coming up with great stuff for science fiction, fantasy, and horror is difficult. And when you can throw out an idea and go to a Google search and find something that's right there and sort of turn it. You already knew you're going to use Tardigrades, but in the original conception, it was like, well, a Tardigrade crew member that would always be CG would be prohibitively expensive if it was a regular member of the Discovery crew. If every time you went into engineering, we had to CG a creature like Ephraim, that would be problematic. But since it's already there, it's like, okay, we've got this idea of a Tardigrade, and we have the idea of terraforming. How can we make it sexier? Oh, well, how interesting. I read these game ideas, and I was thinking about Dune guild navigators, because let's face it, the guild navigators as depicted in David Lynch's Dune kind of look like Tardigrades. Kinda. They've got the funny mouths, and somebody, it's you can never, I don't know how easy it would be to prove this in a court of law, but if you're someone like myself who's incredibly steeped in all of science fiction, fantasy, and horror, whether it's literary or on screen over the last 75 years, these are not big leaps to make. I mean, these are things, if I was looking into a tardigrade character, a cursory Google search, and if I thought for 10 minutes and somebody said, how do we need to morph this tardigrade character? We like the idea of a tardigrade. I watched this video about what a tardigrade is, a water bear or whatever it's called, you know.
Right.
How do we keep this in the show? Well, Google search, you read 2 articles in 5 minutes, you're done. That's how
Or
we
see a gamer's video by chance.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I mean. And that'll show up. That's what I mean. It'll show up in a Google search, and then it's like, okay, the idea. I watched Dune. They fold space. They're eating spice. Human beings who eat spice eventually mutate into the sandworms. You know, if you go the long, it all is part of the same idea, and they spitball in the writer's room or whatever, and they come up with all of these ideas. To me, it's a pretty easy leap to make about how it happened.
Try and sound all scientific at the same time.
Yeah.
CC Antenna 28, I think I said his name right this time, added to his question, I would take a tardigrade partner show in the Star Trek universe by Robert Meyer Burnett based on the original outline. So I think you kind of got the idea of what that show would be. So hopefully that answers that question. Unless you had anything more to add to it, Rob, we'll move on to the next one.
Well, no, but I think, look, I've read a lot of Star Trek novels. And one of my favorite Star Trek novelists early on was Diane Duane. And she created the idea of a Horta crew member on the Enterprise. The Horta was the silicon-based life form from the 2nd season episode Devil in the Dark. You know, it's the creature that burns you and can burn through rock. And Diane Duane added a Horta crew member to the Enterprise, Ensign Narat. And I always thought, how cool is it to have a truly non-humanoid alien? I mean, the Orville has its character, basically the slime character. But the idea that a Horta would be serving on the Enterprise, I love that idea. I thought that was great. So having a true alien, like a giant version of a water bear, the tardigrade, on the Enterprise, interacting with a human being, the same way the Chewbacca Han Solo relationship. I loved that. I thought that was great. And that's what actually would happen, because the idea that all sentient beings in the universe are bipedal humanoids is a little silly. You know, we'd have to deal with a lot of different life forms, and having a tardigrade who happened to know a lot about engineering, I love that idea. I thought it was great. And sure, it was inspired, as I read it, it was definitely inspired by the Han and Chewie relationship. But so what? I mean, the idea of that goes, Han and Chewie is Parker and what was the character in Alien? You had Parker, Yaphet Kotto was Parker, and what was Harry Dean Stanton's character name in Alien? They kind of had the same relationship.
Oh,
what's his name? Why am I drawing a blank? It's Parker and I forget. But it was like 2 guys in engineering fixing things, or 2 girls,
right.
however you want to play it.
Right.
That's like a trope in movies. So Han and Chewie was your mechanic and your driver. It comes from racing. And so the idea that an engineer and his first mate, and you make the first mate an alien, I think is a great idea, and it's a story trope. But then, you know, they had to change that around. We have to, the more we can change Brian Fuller's original outlines, the more we can make the show our own and put our own imprimatur on it. So they took his ideas but changed them. He still got credit, but we didn't have to give him credit on the screenplays eventually, because we rewrote too much of it. So he might get a story by, but he wouldn't have to get a writing credit. I just make the characters walk in a circle to create a Starfleet emblem in the sand. And that wasn't in his original draft. So, even though that was stupid and nonsensical.
Typical bad robot school of writing, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Mexican Iron Man was our next super chat. Thank you so much for the $9.99. Your show today was great, R&B. I'm ordering your doc series tonight as my birthday present to myself. Great set, sounds like. Plus, I want to own my media. I'm scared all about these streaming services.
I'm right there with you. Look, I think the Star Trek, that I had nothing to do with the actual restoration of the series. Mike Akuda and Denise Akuda oversaw it.
All the special features and stuff, though, is what.
Yeah, we did. Well, what was interesting, for 3 years, we were the only people creating brand new Star Trek programming involving all of the principal creators and cast members from Star Trek. We interviewed everybody. In the second season, I sit down and I'm the on-camera host, even though you can tell I was nervous when I was doing it.
Yeah,
I host.
That was so awesome. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I host a 25th anniversary reunion with the original cast of Next Gen, Patrick Stewart on down. Down to Will Wheaton. I mean, it was amazing. And what was funny was I wanted to hire, I mean, I was producing with Roger Lay Jr. all these documentaries, and even I said to Ken Ross, who was in charge at CBS, I said, we should get a celebrity host. And he's like, no, you do it. You're the one that knows. And I'm like, I'm not I don't look like an on-camera personality. He's like, no, you're going to do it. So I found myself hosting a 25th anniversary reunion of the original cast. I mean, Jonathan Frakes, Marina Sirtis, Brent Spiner, Michael Dorn. It was
probably the perfect person to do that because you know these characters in and out. You know the story.
Oh, it was great. I mean, I was like, I was kicking myself. It was insane. It was crazy. And then I had to edit myself. I'll tell you a secret. I actually thinned myself out to make myself look thinner. Don't tell anybody.
That's me.
I altered the frame on myself just to make me look thinner. Don't tell
anyone. 250 of you out there listening, don't say a word.
Don't say it. Don't tell anyone. But if you cut to me, you can tell I'm a little distorted because I made myself
just look a little. Oh, I didn't know.
But no, it was great. But the thing is, the restoration that CBS did, for the most part, despite the fact that season 2 and season 4 had a little bit of controversy, to this day is the single greatest television restoration effort in the history of the medium. And Ken Ross, everyone at CBS, Mike and Denise Akuda, who oversaw everything, everybody, the entire team at CBS Digital did the most amazing job restoring that series. It is astonishing. If you have the DVDs and you have the old versions, all you have to do is A/B, meaning you look between the old and the new. You click back and forth. It's astonishing. The difference is astonishing. I did an interview with Trek Core and also I think Trek News explaining why it's so astonishing. So if you look up those old interviews, I go into in depth as to why. What they did was they went back and they reposted they took the entire show through post-production all the way back to the original negative. And I mean, it's amazing. The original series, Next Generation, was even mixed in 2-channel stereo because that's all they had. Well, CBS, when they restored it for home video for the Blu-rays, they remixed it in 7.1 surround. I mean, it's thunderous. If you go back and you watch things like when Marvin Rush took over as the director of photography, Yesterday's Enterprise, starting with season 3, even I tell people it makes Sub Rosa, one of the worst episodes of Next Generation, so watchable because it looks so damn good on Blu-ray. Masks and Sub Rosa, 2 of the most hideous episodes of that show. Even Justice and Code of Honor, you will have no treaty, no vaccine, and no Lieutenant Yar. That'll even look good from the first season of TNG. Did everyone just go away after I said that?
Absolutely not. We just are intently listening.
No, we love listening to you. Just get quiet.
But
I can't believe I just quoted Code of Honor. People are like, "Oh, that's
all right." The next super chat says it's from the Elusive for $10. Thank you so much. Says Robert, from one Macross Robotech fan to another, did you ever read the 15 books written by Jack McKinney, which tied together the 3 anime shows which comprised Robotech? They're great, by the way.
You know what? I did not. The only Robotech tie-in stuff that I have are the Kamiko comics. I didn't read any of the books, and to be honest, I'm kind of a snob about the original stuff. Like I have the original. I have versions of Macross Robotech was actually made up, for people that don't know, Robotech was made up of 3 different disparate animated Japanese series. There's Macross, there's Southern Cross, Super something Super Southern Cross, and then there's Genesis Climber, Mospeada, and Mospeada. And they were not related. And Carl Masek at Harmony Gold brought the series together and tied them together under the name Robotech. And it was kind of, in a way, it was pretty clever what he did. And I did not read those books, but I am a fan of the original Japanese shows. So I'm kind of a snob when it comes to, a lot of people in America, you could only discover it as Robotech, and we were only able to get the original Japanese versions, much less subtitled versions, a lot later. But I did not read those books. I am aware of those books, however. I actually think I own 2 of them. I just have never read them. So I apologize.
There you go.
Thank you for a super chat, though.
Yeah, thank you so much. Adam Wolford threw us $2. Thank you so much for that, and says, "Hey guys, what about J. Michael Straczynski doing a Star Trek series?"
Yes.
He pitched one. He did an idea where he was going to reboot and build the series up from scratch. You can actually find online. There's a couple of really interesting articles read about that. And this was not Deep Space Nine. He did something else where his idea was to go back and reinvent the show from the beginning. So if you look that up, because I was involved in a document pitch that a writer named Jeff Thorne, I recruited Jeff Thorne to write an idea that I'd worked on with Brian Singer and Chris McQuarrie called Star Trek Federation. So when you read these, if you go back and you look at unmade Star Trek stuff, like Dave Rossi had an animated series that he had pitched that was really cool. He worked on Star Trek with Rick Berman for a long time. So you can actually find Straczynski's Star Trek idea online, his pitch online. It's I don't know the name of it, but it's out there. You can find it. I think that'd be great. I think it'd be great.
All right. Next question is from Nelson Sharita. Sorry. I just probably butchered that either way. $5. Thank you so much. Why do they spend millions on Star Trek brand Why do they spend millions on the Star Trek brand but refuse to make Star Trek stories for Star Trek fans? Well, that's because they keep trying to get new fans that just don't care about Star Trek. I'm sure that's probably
that's what I think. I think they're trying to expand it, and they might not understand, like they might not genuinely understand what really made Star Trek. I mean, I don't want to just rip on it too much and just say, oh, they hate us, they're doing it on purpose, they're doing it because they just want new people and they don't want our money. I don't think that's always the case. It's fun to rant sometimes, but no, I think they just want as many people as they can, and they're just like, oh, who can we get? Well, let's try the Star Wars people, let's try that, maybe possibly.
Right. What do you think, Robert? You've actually been close to that circle. Is that how these?
I think you guys nailed it. I mean, the Star Trek franchise has been around since 1966. Here's my honest opinion about, yes, to answer your question, they're trying to create new fans. It's the same thing that happened in the 70s when Star Wars broke and became the most successful movie of all time. Everybody was scrambling going, what do we have that's like Star Wars? And they had been trying to make new Star Trek all through the 70s, really. Since it went off the air, we had the animated series in 73 and 74, which was 22 episodes. Then they were going to make a movie, Planet of the Titans, with Philip Kaufman, who actually had the idea for Raiders of the Lost Ark, and he ended up directing the Invasion of the Body Snatchers remake. And he was making a movie called Planet of the Titans that was being designed by the production designer Ken Adam and Ralph McQuarrie, who went on to start Wars. He designed basically the Discovery Enterprise before they made the nacelle stupid. But so they were trying to make Star Trek, and then they were going to do the Star Trek Phase 2 TV series that had 13 scripts written for it. And when Star Wars hit and became a huge success, Paramount said, ooh, how can we cash in on this? And Star Trek the Motion Picture was greenlit. Well, the same is true now. They're trying. Here's the big problem with Star Trek is a niche thing. It's never been populist. And even after what I call the post-geek singularity, which means everybody is sort of a geek now, Star Trek is an elitist franchise because it is about the best and the smartest people that are the best at their jobs. That's how you get out on the final frontier. You have to be great. You have to be the most highly educated, the most skilled, because that's what we need on our starships. And the problem now is, in our culture, is being great and being excellent at your job and being the smartest person in the room is now frowned upon. We're now living in a world where everybody's equal. Not only do we want equal opportunity, we want equal outcome. You know, it doesn't matter where you're at, everybody should be given a chance. But that's not what Star Trek is. Star Trek was always inherently about the ideal of ultimately Kennedy's Camelot, the idea of the Kennedy Camelot White House of the early 60s, the promise that it's inherently, I guess, an American idea. We get the best people, and the best equipment, the best scientists, the best everybody to go do their jobs. And that's what Star Trek is. And I think the people that love Star Trek have no problem with the idea of great people doing great things. And there's a lot of people in Star Trek. There's a great, one of my favorite episodes of Star Trek, Bread and Circuses. You have a character, that's the planet where they beam down to a 20th century Rome. And you find a ship captain who talks about how he just couldn't hack it being a starship commander. And he talks in reverential terms about Kirk. And he's like, you don't understand. These people are the best of the best. And I think what's interesting is this idea of that we live in today. I'm all for inclusion of every race, shape, size, color, creed, religious belief, sexual preference, whatever. That's great. But you know what? Not to be on a starship. If you're on a starship, you're the best of the best. It doesn't matter what color you are. It doesn't matter what your gender is. It doesn't matter what your sexuality is. It just matters that you're fucking great at your job. You're not on the spectrum. You're not somebody that has problems, because we don't have time for this. We have split-second decisions, and we're out there on the final frontier. And if you fuck up, we're all going to die. And that's what Star Trek was. Star Trek was about watching a group of people, a diverse group of people that loved each other, that were all really, really good at what they did. And they were able to save the universe and save themselves. And you know what? Now we want to bring in everybody. We don't want to be elitist. We want to have everybody on the ship. And I think the real problem with Star Trek was anybody who loves science, who loves the future, understands that we want humanity to be the best that it can be. I grew up as a kid wanting to see that, wanting to be great. But now the idea of wanting to be great, every kid gets a trophy. You can't say that my kid's less special than that other kid. Why should we not let an inordinate amount of Asian students into Harvard because they're beating all the rest of the students? How? Because they're really good at what they do. They work hard. And there's this really weird idea in our culture now, and I think it is perpetuated by the every kid gets a trophy aspect of it. We no longer want the best people. We somehow want to get by without doing all the work. Look at our economic, everybody's cutting corners. Everybody's stealing or cheating, or let's not have government regulation because, that's too hard and too expensive. So what if the honeybees die? Star Trek was born out of a time where Americans pulled up their bootstraps, took on the hard jobs, and busted their ass and won because they worked really, really hard. Nowadays, that's not what people want to hear. And I think I think fundamentally that's what's happened to Star Trek. As our world has become more, we don't want to be elitist anymore. We don't want to say that, oh, we want everybody to have an opportunity. And I say, as a Star Trek fan, fuck that.
Yeah.
You know what? If we don't have the best people doing their jobs, we will lose. We will lose the planet. We will lose our future. We will lose this country. We are suffering through a time when mediocrity is acceptable. And that's bullshit. And that's what's wrong with Star Trek. Star Trek is being made by mediocre creators who are stealing other people's ideas and are just skating by because they are getting paid. And that unfortunately is what's, I think, inherent. What's wrong with Star Trek right now is what's wrong with America. Star Trek 09 is a perfect example. That movie to me was a metaphor for everything wrong with the United States.
Well, yeah, you just promote people up instead of letting them earn it, like way before they should really have that opportunity. And you're exactly right, though. I'm thinking like, yeah, we live in a society where people are perfectly happy to water the crops with Gatorade. We're there. We're in idiocracy. We're 2 elections away from President Camacho, and this is exactly what the message of Star Trek is, and this is why there's such a huge generational difference, and this is why there's such a huge cultural difference between old school Trek fans and a lot of the new people that come in who might not be aware. They might be very young and they might not have lived in a time where there was competition, where not everybody got a medal, not everybody got an award. And that's what's so sad. I'm like, I keep saying, no, Star Trek used to not be dumbed down. Star Trek, used to expect more of its audience. And if you didn't get it, it wasn't going to shame you for not getting it. It was just something where, oh, you won't get this, you won't get Darmok, but you might get, Data laughing in another thing. There are other ways that it can appeal to everybody.
Right. And I think now, I mean, what's really interesting is Star Trek, it has become a parody of itself in that, there's a reason why Tilly is a fan favorite character.
Mm-hmm.
Tilly, in my world, Tilly would never be on a starship.
No, there's so many things she's done that would have gotten her thrown off. Like there was a couple of things. She was all right in season 1. That short trek, I'm like, no, you didn't call security. Why didn't you not? You should have called security. Oh, you'd beam somebody out into space or wherever. Why didn't somebody say, hey, Ensign Tilly, why'd you use a transporter unauthorized in the middle of the night? Nobody's capable or competent on Discovery except for Michael Burnham, and even then, she makes the most horrific mistakes.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. I mean, and what's look, what I found really, people talked about in the first episode of the second season, how there was that male character that they introduced who was just a dick. And when they were flying down in those Lost in Space fighter pods, whatever they were called.
Oh, the glass bubbles.
Bubbles.
Through an asteroid.
They literally introduced, and a lot of people were screaming, oh, make the white cis male the bad guy. I'm like, that in itself, I mean, the fact that he's some white dude and we're going to make him immediately a dick. That's true. I mean, people have talked about this ad infinitum, and I don't want to be like Mr. Identity Politics guy. But Pike brought that guy as one of the 2 other people he brought from the Enterprise onto the Discovery. He brought that guy. They introduce him as a dick and as somebody who can't get along. And I'm like, I don't believe this. What they're doing is, this is lazy, idiotic, sloppy writing. And this is the worst kind of writing. And they actually, a Starfleet officer who went through how much training and how much experience, they literally kill him off in the episode and make it seem like that's okay because he was a dick to Burnham. And when I watch that, I'm like, forget the fact that he's a white male. What are you saying about Starfleet as an organization? And since when does Star Trek take the death of anybody and make it a joke? That's what Star Trek Discovery did this season. Its second season. It made the death of a Starfleet officer something they made it look like he deserved. And I'm like, we are lost. As people, as a race of people, when we set up our heroic characters, Starfleet characters. I mean, what's really interesting, one of my favorite, it's my favorite Next Generation two-parter, is Chain of Command, that introduces Captain Jellicoe. Captain Jellicoe comes on, and he ends up in conflict with Riker. And there's a great speech where Riker says, you know, there's no joy in what you do. Riker can't handle the differences between Picard and Jellicoe. And Jellicoe is a gruff guy, and at first they make him out to be this dick. But as you watch the episode, Jellicoe is right. And his command style was different, and it wasn't so, oh, if it's what you feel, let's talk to Counselor Troy about it. But what was so great about Next Generation is it became nuanced. And even though we as an audience didn't like Jellicoe at first, because he's being mean to our favorite characters, you realize by the end of that two-part episode, you realize he was right the whole time.
Yeah.
And when he says at the end, when Picard comes back from his mission after he's been tortured by David Warner in one of the great episodes of Next Generation ever, Chain of Command Part 2, when he comes back and Jellicoe says, I've left you the Enterprise, I think it's a little better than before, we know that it is a little bit better. And even though that guy was a dick, he was really good at what he did, and he was right. It might not have been what we liked, but we aren't snowflakes. We can accept it. We don't have to love everything. Not everything can be comfortable. And Discovery, my objection to the show is the kind of writing, when they start killing Starfleet officers and make it a joke, I'm like, we are lost, people. You do not understand what Star Trek is all about.
Right. And I always had a hard time with it, because you look at TOS and Scotty is holding that ship together with, you know, like fucking Scotch tape and glue. You know? But yet we got Discovery, and it's like this prim, perfect, pristine, futuristic, well beyond anything we should be seeing ship. You know, it's just like, oh yeah, whatever. No, at least in the old TOS show, and even sometimes in TNG, you felt like it was, the suspense was in the fact that this shit's real. We're in a place that if anything goes wrong, we're all dead instantly. There's no, you know, getting out of this, you know, really. It's a situation where you're in the deep, dark depths of space, and it's cold, and it's not a place you want to die. And, you know, and it's easy to do. And of course, you're not going to have every Tom, Dick, and Harry, you know, joining. You know, somebody even pointed out, like, Wesley failed the first time. You know, so it's like, yeah, you want the best of the best in Starfleet. You don't want just anybody. So, and it has nothing to do with trying to discriminate against people, but it's a point of fact. You can't have certain people who can't handle stress under certain situations, who shouldn't be in positions they're in. Now, they can be in other parts of the ship and be a part of the crew in a way that doesn't make decisions. Like Tilly shouldn't be in the position she's in, is basically what I'm getting to, like you were saying. So yeah, I totally understand what you're saying, but not to ramble on even more. Chief Cook sent us $4.99, says Ron Moore say he want to do Star Trek if he have total control of the series. Well, that's kind of what we're saying, is you want a showrunner who's going to take control of the franchise and knows the franchise. So I don't know if you have anything more to add to that, guys, other than what we talked about earlier already. But
well, no, Ron Moore would be amazing. But you know what? Ron Moore loves Star Trek. He was an original series fan. He famously, his first episode was not The Offspring, Outcast, I forget. It was a third season script that he first wrote. He's a huge fan, and he already proved himself with Battlestar Galactica. Ron Moore is not the guy that the crew from Bad Robot wants. You know, he would come in and you'd think that the guy, if Ron Moore said to CBS, listen, man, I have Outlander and I've got I did Battlestar Galactica. I mean, who wouldn't want Ron Moore to come back and do Star Trek? But that would mean that Secret Hideout, Bad Robot, whatever their deal is, who knows, would have to usurp control. There's the thing is, there's a lot of money. What they're doing about Star Trek is they're trying to turn it into this viable multi-show franchise where they're going to make a shit ton of money. But unlike Star Trek of the days of yore, Next Generation became a big hit, and it was only after it was an established hit that they said, let's do another spinoff. Now they're doing all this stuff. Section 31. Let's do Discovery. Let's do Picard. I mean, how much money are they going to throw at the Star Trek franchise
They're trying to turn it into the MCU, yeah.
And it's not that. I mean, as the Burnett axiom, never put your universe before your characters or your story. And that's what they're doing. You know, and look, the Lower Decks episode, the thing about Star Trek is that show, as talented as those, I like the creators working on that show, they're making fun of Star Trek. Ultimately.
I said it on the show earlier that this Lower Decks thing is beneath Star Trek. They're going to end up doing all the crap that other shows do to make fun of Star Trek, and it's not going to work. It's and Andre said, you mean like Spaceballs? And Rob and I are like, yeah, that's probably what they're going to do. And it's like, yeah, that's probably what they're going to do. Rob goes, you bet. The first joke is going to be somebody coming through the transporter with their head on backwards.
Yeah.
Now they're working really quickly to rewrite that.
No, but I mean, I think you're right. I mean, I look at that and like Lower Decks. The very idea, first of all, they did that already, and they did one episode of that in TNG, and it was a good episode. It's a really good episode of Star Trek, and it's really sincere, and you're showing characters that were young, that didn't know everything. They were doing what they were supposed to do. They were ensigns, you know, they were on their first job, and I mean that episode's actually It leads to an end, a character that ends in that episode, not in that episode, but an episode later, you find out the fate of one of those characters, and it's heartbreaking. It's actually heartbreaking. And you know they're not going to do that kind of a show.
No, and I said the Orville has already shown you the line, pretty much where a Star Trek show could go to that, as far as it could go. And even Seth MacFarlane knew that, even though it's not a Star Trek branded show. It's not what everybody said it was going to be, and a lot of the critics said it was, because they didn't actually watch the frickin' show until the second season when they finally praised it, and it was a Disney show then.
I kept saying it was Family Guy in space, and
it's not. It's not even close, and that's exactly what I was getting to. Thank you, Mecca. Yeah, it was not Family Guy in space at all, not even close. Because I freaking am not a fan of Family Guy. I'll be honest. Full disclosure, I hate Family Guy. I don't like it. I am like Cartman on South Park. I think Family Guy is a bunch of Remember the Time jokes that have nothing to do with the context of the show. American Dad's a little bit better written. Cleveland Show, let's not talk about. Seth MacFarlane's movies, the first Ted was okay. After that, nothing he's done has been that great. In the West movie, to me, all the best parts were in the trailer. I sat down and watched Orville. I fell in love with the man. Because I knew he just wrote a love letter to Star Trek that nobody else has done before, and is better than any Star Trek we've gotten, even probably prior to Enterprise. So, I mean, sorry, I didn't mean to go on a rant there, but yeah, that's how I
think Orville's better than Enterprise, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, maybe season 4, if we only had season 4 of Enterprise, that's when it got really good, and then they took it away. But no, I'm more easy on Seth MacFarlane's stuff. I've been a fan of his for a very long time. Probably.
I like the guy, don't get me wrong, but Orville made me love him.
Oh yeah, Orville brought me back, because I haven't watched Family Guy in a lot of years.
That's the best Star Trek we got.
It got too much of the same. You know, it's like, okay, I already saw this joke 1,000 times, and you know, and that's at least with the Orville, he's pulling in like the really heavy moral lessons and the life choices. So that's one of the things.
I hope on Hulu he can even get in more depth into stuff.
And people are going nuts attacking him because it's on Hulu, and his reasoning, and I've talked about this a couple of times. His reasoning was, okay, well, he can't stick to the schedule of putting out, 44-minute episodes every week at a certain time. You know, some of the episodes need a little more time to develop the story, and sometimes he needs a little more time to work on them that would interfere with, Family Guy and American Dad and all of his other endeavors.
Well, not only that, I think it did better in streaming numbers. Plus, maybe Hulu's kicking in some extra cash to help with the.
It's possible. It's possible, and I'm like, I'm okay with it. I don't think it's going to hurt or be too off-putting to some viewers. I mean, if you're going to have one streaming service, you pick the one that has the best shows. So,
Robert, you're a fan of the Orville, right?
I do. You know, it's funny. I didn't really watch it when it first came on, and then I caught up and watched all of it. I mean, I don't think it's perfect. I think there's a lot of shows where they've taken modern tales and put a little bit of a sci-fi spin on it. That is what great sci-fi does, but a lot of it is too grounded in our reality. They don't push it enough, and there's a lot of personal stories. but I do like it a lot. I really like the characters. And again, that's what keeps you coming back to the show. And they did some really interesting stuff the second season. And some of it got really dark, even. I was surprised at some of the places that the show went. Pornography addiction in the holodeck. I was like, wow, you're going to go, how's that going to play on Hulu? But
we can do more there, yeah.
yeah, I mean, I quite liked it. And I really do enjoy the show. And I like it. I like, regardless, it still is earnest, and it has a brightness to it. I mean, Star Trek Discovery made me want to like slit my wrists and poke out my eyeballs with a spoon, scoop out the orbs and eat them, because I never wanted to look at anything again. And it's funny because I don't, ultimately at the end of the day, what I want from Star Trek is something that is aspirational. You know, even Deep Space Nine, in the midst of war, what it was doing was showing how a coalition of disparate people, even after the Romulans were brought in because of murder, that the Federation, the Klingons, everybody could band together in the face of terrible adversity and put their differences aside and find a way to work together to defeat the Dominion. And even Deep Space Nine's like, oh, it's so off concept. But in a way, Gene Roddenberry always called Star Trek a wagon train to the stars. Well, what Deep Space Nine was about that fort on the frontier, if you want to go with the Western motif.
Oh yeah, because Quark was the bartender. You had the sheriff. You had
yeah, absolutely, and that's what it was. It was still the Old West show, and while it wasn't the most utopian thing in the world, at the end of the day, it was a show about people aspiring to be the best they could be. And you know, the thing about Deep Space Nine, what people forget, you had a black man and his son, a single father in the black community in the mid-90s, a single father that was so loving and had such a great relationship with his son, where they never even mentioned, until they did Far Beyond the Stars, the episode, race was never even a factor on that show until even they went back in time, past tense part 1 and 2, and they go back to San Francisco and deal with the homeless problem. What was so great talk about representation. You know, you have a black man and his son, you never mention race, and you just see a loving, respectful relationship. And then you eventually meet Cisco's father, Brock Peters, and you see a family unit that has love and great respect. And they don't make a big deal of it. It just is. And that's the kind of representation that the world needs. Keiko and O'Brien.
Yeah.
You know, a working marriage, love and respect. And the people and the interspecies relationship that later developed between Kira and Odo, and then the love that blossomed between Worf and Terry Farrell.
Dax,
Dax. I mean, Jadzia Dax, not Curzon, Jadzia, who was Curzon, but Jadzia and her relationship with Worf. All of these characters were not dysfunctional people. You know, they were shown as they were inherently good people out on the frontier that later got caught up in this horrible, war with the Klingons first and then the war with the Dominion. And they were still showing how good we could be. And even as you moved into it, even villains like Damar, you know, he fell into you hated Damar when you first met him, and like Jakar in Babylon 5, they made him, he actually became a hero in the end. You know, he overcame what was going on. And so for a lot of the people that criticize Deep Space Nine, there's so much to love about that show. And yet, did it get dark? In the pale moonlight, everyone cites that show, and you see how they drag the Romulans into the war. That's a freaking dark episode of Star Trek, man, where you actually have Sisko condoning basically murder. Can I live with it? I can live with it. You know, he brought the Romulans into the war and saved countless lives, but at what cost? Perhaps he lost his soul in that episode, but as he says, he can live with it. I mean, there's a lot to love. I love Deep Space Nine, first of all. And again, it's showing Star Trek at its finest. These are smart, capable people doing an incredible job on literally the edge of the frontier. and it was as dark as it could get. It was still inspiring in the way that Star Trek always was, and I miss that in Star Trek now, and I hope we're going to get that with Picard. I really hope Picard's good. I really do.
See, that was the one thing that they did so well in Deep Space Nine and even Stargate a little bit. You took characters that you didn't like so much. I'm talking mostly like Atlantis, like a Rodney McKay sort of character. You didn't really like him that much at first, and then like I loved him towards the end. I loved him like 3 or 4 seasons in, and same thing with just like you said, Damar or any of the Cardassians in DS9. I ended up really having a great respect and love for them, even though you hate them at first. That's not something Discovery does very well. I think like a Michael Burnham sort of character, she should have had a few seasons of trying to earn her rank and trying to earn her way or her respect. And I think they really fudged that by saying, "Oh, okay, you're sorry. It's all better. Here's your command back, right? Or here's your rank of commander back, or whatever they gave her." They don't get that it takes a lot of characters and a lot of people just years of experience and growth to really learn a lot of life lessons and to kind of come around.
I agree with you. I mean, again, she's this superhuman character that whatever the plot needed her to do, she could just do it. And it was like, I never bought that. That's not what Star Trek is. That's not what it's about. Star Trek is about a collective that is greater than the sum of its parts.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, listen, I need to jump. I need to jump off this chat. Right. But thanks for letting me go off and pontificate.
All right. No problem. We do have a few more super chats and then we're going to end ourselves anyway. So thank you so much for joining us. As always, it's a pleasure and an honor, of course. So thank you for taking the time to hang out with us here and help us talk about you being in the news and everything else related to Star Trek that's going on, Mr. Robert Meyer Burnett. Do check out the Burnett Work. That's where he streams from on nearly a daily basis, almost every day. I think.
Yeah, I try and do it every day, and as I like to say, I try and make it the most hospitable place on the web where everybody's welcome. Depending, it doesn't matter your point of view. I mean, I've got a good moderating group that I want everybody to feel like they can come there. And look, I can be a toxic Star Trek fan. I understand that, but I try and foster a community where I want to hear everybody's points of view and everybody is welcome. As long, my only rule is just be respectful of everyone else. You can say what you want, but do it in a respectful manner to everybody else. That's all I ask. But yeah, the Burnett Work, or you can follow me on Twitter at BurnettRM or on Instagram at RMBurnett.
And unfortunately, a couple of these questions have to do with you, but we'll do our best to answer them.
Oh, I'll answer. If you got more questions, I'll answer them.
Well, real quickly, Echo Base Network are the good people over there who we got to have on one of these days.
By the way, they come onto my show. The Echo Base Network is a huge supporter of my own show. So shout out to them because they're great.
They want to know if we all feel like, including you, feel like Picard is a supporting character in his own show from the trailer. We kind of get that vibe. I don't know about you, Robert.
Well, again, you know what? I always say to people, trailers are marketing tools. And I always encourage everybody to wait and see before you see the final movie or the final show. And how I use it. Go back and watch the very first trailer for Raiders of the Lost Ark. That trailer I thought was terrible. When I first saw the trailer back in 1981, I was like, this is garbage. I don't want to see this. The only reason I went and saw it was because of Lucas and Spielberg. Based on the trailer, you would not know. I walked out of Raiders of the Lost Ark the first time I saw it. It was at a public sneak 2 weeks before it opened. It was playing on a double bill with Excalibur, actually. And when I walked out, I couldn't believe what I'd seen. I was blown away. If I had judged the movie based on its trailer, I would have been like, I'm not going to see this. So right. I would always encourage everybody to wait and see and don't judge things by the trailer. Just wait until you see the finished product.
All right. And then their last question, and we'll let you get out of here. And thank you again so much. Echo Base Network, another $4.99. Do you have any faith, Robert, in the Rise of Skywalker, knowing what he did to Star Trek? Can he finish strong and make a satisfying ending?
Yeah. Well, again, you know, I can't apply logic to one thing and not to another. I am certainly not a fan of J.J. Abrams' films. I'm not a fan of Star Trek 09, Star Trek Into Darkness. I did not like Super 8. I certainly was not a fan of The Force Awakens. However, I think that part of the problem that I didn't like about those movies is that J.J. Abrams was beholden to somebody else's agenda. And I think after Last Jedi, I think maybe I'm hoping that The Rise of Skywalker, we're going to see some uncut J.J. Abrams, and maybe he will not be so constrained by what everybody else needs from him, especially when it came to The Force Awakens. They spent $4 billion. They had to hit all these notes, and they wanted to play it safe. I'll never understand why they didn't give us one movie with the old cast back and introduce everybody together where we got to, I mean, why? I've said to people that well, I don't want to be speculative, but why they didn't make a movie with Han, Luke, Leia, R2, Chewie, 3PO, R2D2, all of them in one last adventure where they're all together, where they introduce all the peripheral characters in that film and then blast them all apart at the end. And then we see these new characters go off. I'll never understand that. But I do think that we're going to see something that J.J. Abrams, it's his time to shine in my mind. I'm hoping that he'll pull something out. I don't honestly, I don't care about the new characters. It's not that the actors are bad. They're not. I just don't care about them. They have failed to make me care about any of these new characters because we're still dealing with the Skywalker saga and all our three main characters are gone. And so who cares? I just ultimately don't care. But
I agree.
In not caring, that means I can walk into this movie and I can sit down and be like, surprise me, man. Give me your best. So I'm going to go into Rise of Skywalker with my eyes wide open, my heart beating, and I'm hoping against all hope that it's going to be great. I really believe that. I really want it to be great. And until it's not, I will have a smile on my face and I look forward to seeing it.
All right. Well, with that, we will let you scooch out of here. Again, thank you so much, Mr. Robert Meyer Burnett. You can check him out on the Burnett Network, as always. Pleasure to have you here, man. Thank you again for your time. You're always so generous.
Oh, man, I love being on your channel. And by the way, I love all the controversy we all stir up.
Well, I'm sure there's going to be some more here after this, so we'll definitely be in touch some more. I know Andre's going to have a million questions for you, so I'll talk to you very soon. So, again, thank you so much.
All right, I'll talk to you guys later. And actually, guys and girls, it's always great to have you here, Mecca.
Mm-hmm.
I will talk with you all later.
Take care, sir, and thank you. And we're actually just going to scooch on out of here ourselves. Thank you again, Mexican Iron Man, for the other $14.99 super chat. He says, thank you, guys. No, thank you, sir. Mecca, real quick, tell them where they can find you so we can get the wrapped up.
Random 42, but go subscribe to the Burnett Network. I'm linking him in chat here, so go subscribe to Burnett Network. You can find him if you want.
But yes, also check out Mecca Random's channel if you haven't already. I'm sure you have, because she is the YouTube harpy. We love her so much. So again, thanks again to Robert Meyer Burnett for his time. I couldn't believe he gave us so much time today. So thanks again, guys. You had something else to say, Mecca? Go ahead. Did you have something to say or no?
Oh, just bye. See you, everyone.
Oh, bye. Oh, yeah, and don't forget about both of our Star Trek Las Vegas funds. You can still contribute to both. There's still time left before we have to leave.
We do have some, we might have some Star Trek Discovery news tomorrow.
Yeah, and I might have to try and see if I can figure out how to stay an extra day. And we'll actually have more Star Trek news tomorrow that we didn't get to today. So, yes, please stay tuned for that tomorrow, probably. So, all right. We have a long list of things to get to. So, take care, everybody. We might do a special show tomorrow.